Hi, mystery writers. Welcome to the studio. And I want to talk just a second about why I call it the studio, because it's a place where we can talk about being creative, and it's also a place where we can actually work on what we're doing. And today I wanted to talk about the beginning of your mystery because it is so important. It can make or break your agreement with the reader. Um, the first few pages of your mystery tell the reader whether they want to read more. So you want to be very clear about what you're doing in that beginning. Your reader's not going to wait for you to get ready to begin to commence. Your opening pages are an appetizer for the main meal of your story. So the first 10 pages or so, the first chapter, set your reader's expectations for what's coming next for a good read. So right at the beginning is the time to introduce your story and the story elements. And how you tell the story now creates your reader's desire to continue. So first you want to show how you're going to tell the story. So deciding on how to start your mystery influences everything that comes later in the story. Knowing your need to introduce your detective soon, you need to make a story so you can set your story in motion. Right away, your reader will know the point of view, first person or third person, and you'll demonstrate the narration and the narrator's voice. And as you set the tone for your story, dark, dramatic, thoughtful, touched with humor, whatever that is, your tone, you know enough about the story to set the tone. You have to know enough about the story to set the tone, because that tone is something you're going to carry through for the rest of your story. If you change your tone later, your reader's going to feel cheated or tricked by the beginning. It's like a bait and switch sale. So you don't want to do that. And that is the reason that sometimes people start with something, say, sexy sex scene or something, because they think they're going to grab the reader's attention. But if it doesn't have to do with the story and doesn't set up the story, your mystery, it's not going to work. Okay, so you want to be true to your genre. If your story is a mystery, hint at how you're setting up a puzzle. Introduce your protagonist right away and give them a name and introduce them in action. I know I've said that before, but I say it again. Your detective's everyday world, which is the beginning of the story, can be action. It doesn't have to be action about the main mystery of the story, but your reader needs to know how your detective functions in their world. So you want to show skills that your sleuth will use later in the story to solve that main puzzle. You're probably not gonna be at the inciting incident yet, or that discovered body, but you want to give your reader a sense of how your protagonist will meet more significant challenges later in the story. How do they work? How do they operate? And you want your reader to care enough about your protagonist to be their eyes and ears through the story, because your protagonist is your mystery reader's reader through the puzzle. It's your protagonist eyes and ears that help them solve the mystery. So you want to get your reader to care by developing empathy. You have the rest of the novel to expand on the setting and introduce other characters and plunge your detective into that main mystery puzzle. But for now, right at the beginning, You want to build empathy between your reader and your detective. That's the main goal you want right at the beginning. And the best way to build empathy is to show your sleuth in action, responding to a challenge. It's like your reader gets to see how your sleuth works. The challenge doesn't need to be big, but you must show your reader how your sleuth responds to that challenge, even a small one. That gives them a clue. It helps them care about your character. And you probably want to introduce at least one character opinion. I know I've written about and talked about giving your sleuth opinions, and so you can throw one in here right at the beginning, all right? Your sleuth is going to have opinions about people and the world around them, and a stated opinion creates an immediate connection for your reader. It doesn't matter if your reader agrees with the opinion or not. It just creates that connection. The opinion is the reader's view into your character, and the more they understand your character, the better they care about them, and you want them to care because they want to follow that detective through the rest of the story. The next thing you want to focus on is to be in that story world. You want to give your reader a sense of where they are in time and place. Give them details about your character's surroundings. Is it urban or rural or coastland or inland or small town or city? Uh, the setting doesn't matter, but you want to give your reader a sense of being there. I call it grounding the reader. What matters is showing your readers where they are and how your protagonist responds to those surroundings. Is it present day? Is it Victorian London? Is it 14th century France? The time of your story reflects the cultures and mores that may or may not be familiar to your reader. So help them understand the world, or at least introduce them to that story world right at the beginning so they have a sense of place. So one thing I want to note is that beginning writers often mistake the everyday world of the protagonist for daily activities like eating and getting up, or a multitude of other things, what they have for breakfast, etc. And that is not it. That is not the detective's everyday world that you want to show. You want to show your protagonist interacting with their world and the people with it and solving some problems. It can be a little small problem, but you still want to show your readers the skills. And you also, at the beginning, you want to give your reader a sense of your prose style. Um, do you write short, snappy sentences, or do you play with words and syntax? And whatever your prose style, you want it to remain consistent through the story. Just like the tone is going to be consistent through the story, your prose style is going to be consistent. How you write the story is the story's voice. So if you write in the first person point of view, your narrator will guide your prose style. Your first person, it's going to be in the voice of your character, right? And you have a little more control over the third person point of view through your vocabulary and syntax. So your prose style needs to remain consistent throughout the story, and you're introducing it to your reader because readers have preferences. So make sure your beginning shows how you write the story, because if they like your prose style, if it resonates with them, they're going to keep reading. And that's what you want at the beginning of the story. You want your reader to like your story enough to keep going, okay? So action at the beginning of your story needs to be meaningful for the character and the story. Just like I mentioned before, the sexy sex scene that has nothing to do with the story, just cut it. Any action that you show at the beginning of your story needs to relate to your story, how you tell the story. Uh, and action, just to have action, isn't meaningful. But it goes for sexy sex scenes, and it also goes for a fight scene that has nothing to do because you're doing action. But that's not the point, all right? A smaller action that reveals your hero's character is more meaningful than a big fight scene because you build your story context with small actions showing your character interacting with the world, all right? You can build more meaning later. This is all an introduction. This is all like, it's like one big tease for your reader who starts the book and goes, oh, I like this guy. I like the way he thinks. And what is this big problem they have? They're all of that. And they like the tone of voice. And they like reading snappy stories with short sentences, or they like having a sense of humor. Whatever it is your reader likes, you want to give them a sense of it now, because this is your promise that they're going to like the rest of your story. Um, and you want movement. The story doesn't start later after the first few pages. It starts now. I'm going to give you an example of that. I think I've mentioned that I'm taking a writing course with Naseem Khan, and one of my exercises for this week was to look at the beginning. Oddly enough, I had already scheduled this, and then that came up. But I went and I looked at, I've rewritten my beginning 5 times. But anyway, today I looked again and I took out about 400 words. And that is because the story starts now. And I was desperately trying in my own way to set up my character's everyday world. And I just, the story starts now, and it reads so much better and it's so much more engaging. Um, so when you plunge your hero into action, you move the story to the consequences of the action. Um, and that is going to set up expectations and raise questions for your reader. It's like, oh my goodness, it starts with this. Now what's going to happen? All right. So immediately your reader wants to know what's going to happen next. And you want your reader to ask that question, what's going to happen next? You want them to ask that question from the very beginning of your story. Okay, and the first sentence, I want to just spend a moment on the first sentence because it's the thing, it's the first thing your reader reads, it's the first introduction. Does it have the tone and the style and what's going on? So some writers, including me, usually save working on that first sentence until they finish the novel, because it's the most important sentence in the story. It needs to show your voice, it needs to have a point of view, and it needs to have a rudimentary plot, like get your reader into what's happening right now, and some hint about your character. So that's a lot of work for one sentence to do. So take your time, put in a filler first sentence, and just keep working on it as you're writing your story. Um, Basically, who's on first in your story? You are. That's the point I want to get across. That you are introducing your reader to how you tell a story, how you tell a mystery, how you create a character, how you introduce action. And you just keep refining. So your job in that first chapter is to bring your reader into the story and promise them that everything that you are showing them right now is a hint of what they're going to get later in the story. Okay, I hope that helps. That was a long one today, but the beginning is so important. And if you write the beginning when you first start your novel, as you continue writing your story, you can keep going back and refining that first chapter because it is so important. It is your entry. Well, no, it's not your entry, it's your reader's entry into your storytelling. So make it shine. All right. Okay. Keep writing. I'll see you next week.